Welcome back to America Trends here on You to America. Glad you're with us tonight. Hey, President Trump announced some big new tariffs on China today on $50 billion worth of goods. We're going to be talking about that and some other stuff with Tom Del Beccaro coming up. He's of Political Vanguard. Also talking about what to look for in a nanny or in any sort of child care professional, if that's what you're in the market for. So stay with us for that. But first, we are talking about financial issues with Jacqueline Newman, friend of the show and matrimonial expert out of New York City. She's also a divorce lawyer, and there's her website, nycdivorcelawyer.com. She's got great information for us today on 5 signs of financial abuse in marriage and what women need to watch out for. Welcome, Jacqueline.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for being here with us. So you say what women need to look out for because you say primarily they're the ones that have this happen to them.
Yeah, I mean, it's more often women than men just because we're still in a situation where men are more often than not the primary breadwinners, and you still have a lot of women that play more of the traditional role. So that, financial abuse is something where someone will use the control of money in order to control the person in the relationship. So unfortunately, it still is probably affecting more women than men, even though it can affect men, but again, more women than men probably.
Jacqueline, I bet it can be subtle. It's probably happening to women or maybe men, and they might not even realize it. They just think it's what marriage is about.
That's true, and that's why it's, financial abuse is one of the types of abuse that's probably least recognized. I mean, you have physical abuse, where obviously everybody knows what that is. There's a lot of after-school specials on that. And emotional abuse is really getting a lot of headlines now, too, so people are aware of that. But financial abuse is still a little bit in the shadows. And really, it's one of those things where, again, someone's controlling money, but it's hard to identify because it may just be that, the man is in charge of the money and the woman, doesn't play as much of a role in that. And therefore, she just assumes that this is the way it's supposed to be, as you said. But sometimes it really can be an issue of abuse.
And you say it is related to emotional abuse in a way.
It is, because again, it's an issue of control. And a lot of times when people are in emotionally abusive relationships, they'll do that, they'll put people down, they'll be abusive, they'll say bad things about them, all really to be able to control. So financial abuse is just another way to do that.
So what does it look like? What specific things might a woman look for that you think she should try to notice and pay attention to?
Well, one of the first signs I would say is that when women are in what I call the financial dark, they're really just completely unaware of what's going on financially. Now, again, if there's a woman that, plays that role in her marriage, it doesn't mean she's being financially abused. But if she wants to know, and her husband is saying, no, you know what, you don't need to worry about that, this is something I take care of, that could be being left in the financial dark. So that would be, I'd say, number one. Another thing that people want to look for is if, you have a husband that gives out an allowance to his wife. He says, you get, $100 a week or whatever it is you get a week, and that's all you get. And so when it's doled out that way, it could be something that could be seen as an element of control. Again, I'd like to put the disclaimer out that if people are living on a budget and this is kind of what they decide to do, so be it. But if you have the husband who's out shopping at Barney's and you have the wife that has to be shopping at Kohl's, that might be an issue. And that might be an issue of, doling out allowances and really being financially abusive and controlling.
And you say actually using those allowances for tit for tat, keep the house clean. That's no good. Yeah, no, that's not a good thing. And to that end, another issue that some people want to look out for is when you have to account for every penny that's spent. I had a case once where, the husband was making many millions of dollars a year, and the wife had to literally produce receipts for every pencil she bought for her son for school supplies and things like that. When you have to really account for every single penny spent, that's another element of control. Again, if you're on a budget and you want to basically everybody be on the same page, so be it. But then it's got to be reciprocal. It can't be just on one person. Sure. Sometimes if one partner is primarily responsible for sort of taking care of the kids day to day, the other spouse might not even realize how much she is spending on the child.
Oh, that's absolutely true. It's amazing how much money you spend. I mean, we live in New York City, and I say it costs $20 when you walk outside to breathe the air. So you really don't know what's being spent. And I think that when you have one person who's primarily taking care of the children and buying ice cream and buying this and buying that, and then you have somebody who's just not spending money in that same way, they feel like it's just frivolous and it's just going out the window and, money doesn't grow on trees, and then everybody gets into that kind of battle.
What other extreme cases have you seen besides having to account for every pencil she bought?
Well, another thing that you see about, for financial abuse is when you have somebody who guilts the other party into not working. So what I mean by that is you'll have a situation where, let's say, the wife leaves the workforce for a couple of years to help raise the children, and then she wants to go back. And then you have the husband who will say, you're a bad mother for doing that, or will really make her feel so badly about the idea of going back to work. And if that's what she wants to do and he makes her feel badly about it, that could be an issue. And that could be another element of control. And one of the reasons he may be motivated is he doesn't want her to have the outside interest. He doesn't want her to be making money, and that might make him feel less useful in the marriage. And for her, she feels that she wants to, do other things. And if she doesn't, that's fine. And if everybody makes an agreement that, the wife is going to play more of the primary caretaker role, that's perfectly fine if everyone's on the same page. But if they're not on the same page, then that's a problem.
We're talking to Jacqueline Newman, New York City-based divorce lawyer, who she's talking about the signs of financial abuse. And if that's happening and what you just described, how does a woman stand up or a man stand up to the other spouse? How do you counsel them, maybe?
It's very difficult. I mean, it has to be recognized that there's abuse happening. I mean, that's the key. And if you recognize that the abuse is happening and this is an element of control, then that's when you need to be seeing a therapist. You need to be recognizing the issues in your marriage and doing things to get help, because you don't want to end up in my office.
Have you ever dealt with anyone or counseled anybody who had found that their spouse was stealing money?
So that's what I would say is probably one of the fifth signs, yes. You are, a lot of times what will happen is that if somebody, let's say, inherits money, let's say the wife inherits money, and that is considered technically separate property, that's her money. Now, that doesn't mean that she doesn't spend it on the marriage, but it's her choice to do so. And very often you'll see, in a situation where we're talking about, the husband will say, well, I've worked and I've contributed to the marriage, the least you can do is put this money in. And that's fine if everybody agrees to it. But if they don't agree to it and he just goes and takes that money and spends it, then that's stealing. I mean, that's what that is. And that is another element of financial abuse.
And it also has to do with respecting your spouse enough to want to get his or her input and not just saying, this is how it's going to be, and this is what I'm doing with the money.
Absolutely. I mean, that's really the key and the crux to all of it, is the respect element, is to recognizing that people bring different things to the marriage and not trying to control each other. Everyone should have equal say. I mean, if you can respect that and listen to each other, then, hopefully, again, you won't end up in my office.
Love and respect. Tell us your books as we head to break. We're going to hold you over. I want to talk with you. I want to ask you about how sometimes I've seen or heard about one spouse ruining the other person's credit score. And then if they head into a split, it can be a big deal. But tell us your books as we head to break, Jacqueline.
So I have one book that's for women, that's Soon to Be X, and the other book I have for men is Soon to Be X for Men. And both of them really are books that are directed toward each gender and hopefully will help people get through the really difficult process of divorce.
Okay, very helpful. Jacqueline, we'll see you after the break. We'll be right back on America Trends.
Visit Cuba.
Welcome back to America Trends. We are talking to Jacqueline Newman, an NYC divorce lawyer and matrimonial experts. We're talking about the 5 signs of financial abuse in a marriage and what people can do about them. Jacqueline, welcome back.
Thanks.
So let's go over those five signs before we start. Recap.
Okay, so it's keeping someone in the financial dark, not allowing somebody to know what's going on financially and what assets they have. It's when someone doles out an allowance. That's another thing you want to be looking out for. When somebody has to account for every penny spent and produce receipts and all of that type of thing. When you guilt a spouse for possibly wanting to work and earn an income. And then also, obviously, when someone's stealing money.
Jacqueline, talk about how one spouse can impact the other's credit score and why, even if we love this person, we should really watch out and be careful.
Right. So what will happen sometimes is that people have joint credit cards. And they will ultimately, not pay them or do whatever, and that can affect everybody's credit score. Not to mention, I've definitely heard cases where you've had people that have opened credit cards in their spouse's name and then obviously run up balances and not pay, and then ultimately that would affect their credit score. So it is something you want to watch out for. I know a lot of people that will run credit checks every now and again just to kind of make sure that they're, as clean as they think they are. So, it's always good to be wary.
Right, because if you split, that's when you need your credit score most to be good.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I tell people when they're considering divorce, if they don't have access to a lot of funds on their own, is that they should open a lot of credit cards. You want to have access to money. You want to be able to take advances. You just don't want to be stuck in a position where you have no money and you have to basically, do whatever the other person says because you just need some money to eat.
So not just take care of your credit, build it up.
Absolutely. It's a very, very wise thing to do because a lot of people don't. A lot of people will just be on their husband's credit card or just not have credit cards of their own. And so it's very, very important to have credit cards and to, obviously keep their balances paid and build your credit.
Jacqueline, I want to shift gears for a minute. There is talk because of some of the allegations made toward President Trump. What would happen if, while in office, he and Melania got a divorce? And some of the questions are, would he have to pay spousal support? What would that all look like? What do his prenups look like? Can you speak on that?
Well, I have not personally done his prenup, but I can take a pretty good guess on what it says. Yeah, I mean, it would be a very interesting thing. And, I can't say it would shock me greatly should that happen. But what you'd be basically looking at is that, there is a prenuptial agreement. I'm sure, it was well drafted and it will be adhered to. However, what I think would be very interesting to see is whether there will be certain things that she will ask for that weren't in the prenup. Because while this prenup probably provides for certain assets, it provides for certain spousal support for her, it would not be addressing child support because spousal support, prenuptial agreements cannot address things related to the children. So that will be an open issue. But I do wonder whether she will make more arguments about the fact that when she signed this prenup, there was no anticipation of him being president. And she has been now thrown into the public eye in a way that she wasn't previously. Not to mention there's security issues. There's a lot of things that have changed. So I wonder, should this go to divorce, whether she will make an argument that whatever was in the prenuptial agreement should be enhanced based on the fact that we're just in a different circumstance right now.
And a contested divorce might force President Trump to reveal some financial things that he didn't disclose during the election.
Yeah, I've heard people saying that technically divorce cases are supposed to be sealed and they're supposed to be confidential. And I'm sure they will make major, major efforts to have that happen. That said, yeah, I mean, I think it's an open for him. And my guess is that if he's smart about it, he will want to settle this case without court and do this as quietly and amicably as possible.
And again, we wish them the best, President Trump and Melania. No talk of them divorcing, just some chatter on the anti-Trump people. So just wanted to bring that up. But they are no reports of any friction there that can be validated. So just want to mention that. How do you, I know that you have these books, one for a man and one for a woman, right?
That's correct.
And you try to counsel people on how to stay married, how to show that respect. What advice can you give people, and how do they know when they've really reached the limit? Is there a point where most people, we just know it's done?
Well, one of the things that I ask people when they first walk into my office, men or women, are you sure you want to get divorced? I think it is one of the most important questions that a divorce attorney can ask, because if they hesitate, even for a millisecond, I really encourage them to go to therapy, go to marriage counseling, do what they can to make sure, because divorce is emotionally exhausting, it's financially exhausting, and you need to make sure this is what you want to do, because you never want to look back with regrets. And so when clients say to me, I'm not totally sure, then I say, please, go be sure, because you don't want to do this if not. But that being said, when somebody is ready to do it, they know that they're done, and they just cannot imagine staying in this marriage any longer, whether there's abuse, whether it's just they're just not compatible, whether it's just destructive for them and their children. Whatever it is, people usually know when they know.
Right. If it's abusive, it's pretty clear signal.
Yeah, I would agree with that, yes.
I'll bet they're glad to have you to sort of counsel them and guide them along the things, because you can sort of say what you just said, maybe guide them, counsel them, but you're also such an expert on sorting out all these things having to do with divorce.
Well, thank you. I like to think that, being that I come from a place of really believing that people need to get through this as unscathed as possible. I'm not looking for the scorched earth type of situation. A lot of times, especially if there are children involved, you need to be able to co-parent this person moving forward, assuming it's possible. So I'm a big advocate of really kind of just like, don't hit below the belt and stay as calm and, move forward with this as best you can without, really destroying yourself and your family.
So we talked about the financial pitfalls, and I know you and I chatted last week even about what to do if you think you might split, if you want to get custody of the dog, what to do if you want Fido and you want to fight the person for that. What other things do you suggest if people think this might be heading downhill? What do you counsel them to pay attention to and to take care of?
Well, one of the first things you want to do is, as we talked about a little bit with the financial abuse, is you want to make sure that you have access to funds. And whether that means opening credit cards, whether that means getting some money into your own name, I mean, it's important that you have money, especially if you are the non-moneyed spouse, because you don't want to be in a situation where the other person cuts you off. So I think that that's one of the first things you want to do. The other thing is that people really need to put together what their needs and their wants are. A lot of people walk into this and they're just so emotionally distraught, which obviously makes a ton of sense. but then their minds are all over the place. And so it's so important because the way you start a divorce is a lot of the way you're going to end your divorce. So if you come in guns blazing, you might end that way. And I think that it's very important for people to just have their goals very clear as to what's important to them. You know, I tell people to make a list. I tell people to make a list of all the concerns they have, all their questions. So hopefully in an initial consultation, I can answer them so they can sleep at night.
All right, Jacqueline Newman, we so appreciate your being here with us tonight with these very helpful tips for us.
Thanks so much for having me.
You bet. I want to take one more look at your website, nycdivorcelawyer.com. She's a New York City-based divorce lawyer and matrimonial expert. Lots of background, managing partner of a top-tier Fifth Avenue Manhattan law firm. And it focuses exclusively on divorce, from prenups to high net worth people contemplating marriage to conflict matrimonial litigation and disillusion. So we do appreciate your expertise, and we'll look on your website for your books too, Jacqueline. Thanks to her so much. And we're going to be right back on America Trends with Tom Del Beccaro talking about the political issues of the day and what to look for in a child care provider if you're in the market for that. Stay with us.